Hello and welcome. I am Kalpana Singhal, Editor-in-Chief, CXO TV and Techplus Media, and we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Bhuvnesh Shukla, CTO and CISO, AGD Bank, for this very interesting fireside chat on exploring big data models in financial institutions. Bhuvnesh is an IT leader with experience in banking and financial services domain. He has got diverse experience in IT delivery, in banking product development, consulting, and overall management of IT in banking securities, fintech, and payments bank companies. Well versed with implementation of digital transformation framework, combining enterprise architecture, tools, and business process innovations across markets in Asia, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and America, while currently he is based out of Myanmar. So this engaging fireside chat will attempt to capture what financial organizations are doing in their big data business modeling journey. Welcome, Mr. Shukla.
Thank you.
So how do you see the future of banking in the current evolving circumstances and technologies?
In fact, if you see that the banking had been evolving significantly, if I relate to 2-3 decades back, when I was a student at that time, we used to go to the bank and then take a token and do the transaction. And then in India, I was in India, and at that time when the desktop computers were brought in banking, and there was a lot of resistance that, okay, this is going to kill the employment, right? If you see from there, the banking has come long away. Now we have a centralized core banking servers and all the transactions are managed centrally. There are software processes in between which assist people in doing the operations efficiently. Now, what has happened is that this has resulted in the accumulation of data at one place, and that's how now we are talking about bringing in the business intelligence, or commonly people call it as an analytics. And now when you talk about this data of one bank, which is collected over a period of 1 year around, right, and all the kinds of data which is resulting in from the CASA transactions, which is resulting from the loans, operative accounts, which is resulting from the trade finance transactions, right? So and then bringing in the text data also together, then it becomes the big data. Now the banking has evolved significantly. If you see the Indian context, when the BJP government bring in this thing, what we call as sorry, I'm missing out the term. When they stopped the 1,000 rupee currency note, right? At that time, people were not left with the choice but to use the digital banking mechanism. Now, the advantage with a country like India was that the IT infrastructure backbone was already prepared to take the digital transactions, right? And UPI and the National Payment Corporation of India has already brought in those kind of mechanisms in order to manage it efficiently. But what has happened is that over a period of time, the digitalization of banking in multiple countries has given also a new domain of fintechs. So the fintech application, what they do is that they are not they do not offer all the banking features, but they give the payment capabilities, and they give the payment capabilities with the flexibilities. The way ATM invention of ATM has revolutionized the withdrawal, the money withdrawal concept, and then again the same devices were used for depositing the money. Similarly, this fintech application also have revolutionized the payment concept, where there is no need to carry even the plastic money, only an electronic device in the pocket, and people can roam around the world without any currency in hand, if the currency is there in both. So what has happened is that the digitalization of the banking operations. So the banking is evolving significantly. Now we are talking about, whenever we talk about business process, so there is always a discussion. Can we do it 100% digitally? So for example, people are saying that, can we open the account 100% digitally? If you talk about 10 years ago or 5 years ago, people were saying that what will happen to the wet signatures? But now the accounts are open for totally digitally, right? Without any issues at all, right? Similarly, tomorrow people will say that now, earlier, if 5 years ago, people were saying that in order to open an FD, you have to go to the bank. But today, you open your mobile banking, and if their money is lying in your account, you go and click and say that, okay, X% of money should go into the my FD, and immediately the bank will acknowledge back. The system will acknowledge back to you in real time. So these are the kind of facilities which are coming through literally, right? So more and more things are becoming easier. Now, if we talk about the corporate banking, for example, earlier what used to happen is that in the corporate banking, there's a difference between the retail banking and the corporate banking. In the retail banking, I can do whatever transactions I want to do. But in the corporate banking, there is an approval workflow, right? Even now, the internet banking applications at my bank, we are implementing a corporate banking, so many features where the approval workflow is also part of the internet banking application. So that what happens is that anything comes for approval within the corporate banking, so the maker person enters that information and the checker can approve it in real time, whether it's a working office hours or not. That kind of flexibility is coming in. Now, the evolution of banking is very important, because with the pandemic experience the world has seen in the last 18 months or 20 months, it has become mandatory to provide such kind of flexibilities into the banking, because with that kind of a health challenge, the need of money at any point in time was quite significant. Now, if the banking cannot provide that kind of flexibility going forward, people will look for some other solution. So all the banks, so now two streams of solutions are coming in. Some of the banks themselves are trying to become fintech, and some of the fintechs are trying to become bank. Example is Paytm, fintech trying to become bank, and the bank trying to become fintech. So many of them you would have seen that, the Chiller and the M-Pesa in South Africa, and so many companies have come up with the fintech solution. So definitely banking is evolving significantly. Now, having said this evolution of banking, is it going to kill the jobs? No. But is it going to increase the technological complexity? Yes, right? So what happens is that the banks have to see that whether their business processes have to be redefined in the light of new kind of capabilities, and it has to be made more flexible, efficient, extensible, and secure.
Absolutely, sir. So you talked about the fintechs. That brings me to the next question, which is how do you see the evolving fintech landscape over the last couple of years? And the current pandemic, as you rightly said, has certainly given a flip to these fintechs. Do you see them as a threat or a collaboration partner for the traditional banks?
Now, the answer to your question will depend upon the kind of geography we are considering. No doubt, India, the fintechs were, if you see, the Paytm came almost a decade back, right? At that time, the banking, the mobile banking and the internet banking acceptance was there, but it was not widely being used. Still, it was a cash economy, right? But what has happened is that these fintech, they started bringing in the habit of digitalization in the payment space, and people started using them, and they started finding them more useful, more flexible, more easy, right? And it was versatile enough. It was very what you call as comfortable. People started becoming comfortable. Uh, the word comfortable is more appropriate over here. So people started feeling comfortable, because what has happened is that at the same time this channel was coming through the mobility channel, at the same time mobile device was also becoming popular around the world. So going hand in hand, the mobile device and the payment capability inside the mobile device together has triggered this, right? So fintech has become very important, because what happens is that if you see, if people, when they open laptop, if they have to do something, some serious work, or maybe the youngster, they use it for gaming. Otherwise, if you see, everybody will be carrying their mobile device all the time. Now, any fintech application sitting in the mobile device is available with the customer all the time, right? Wherever they are. So any payment capability, any kind of transaction capability that solution is bringing in is going to be more widely used, and that is going to be always become a lifestyle of every consumer around the world, right? So fintech applications are not going to go away, but more and more innovation will be coming in. For example, you will be surprised to learn that in Myanmar, now people are purchasing gold using fintech directly in terms of. So I don't think so. This has become more popular in India, right?
Yeah.
So people are not purchasing gold and silver using fintech, right? Maybe possible to the some Tanish website you can go and you can pick, but still people will go to the shop and then people will. Now the thing is that these fintech applications are bringing in even the charity donations are happening through fintech, right? Why? Because what has happened is that with the crowdfunding concept, it has become more efficient. Rather than going to one person and getting a donation of 1 lakh, a fintech application can very easily reach to 1 million people, and if they donate one, it becomes 1 million rupees. You get
Yeah,
10 lakh,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? Because the reach is over there. So fintech has become very, very significant, and it is not going to go away. Now the thing is that in the Indian context, what has happened is that people have started looking at the chargeback fees, right? So the chargeback in the UPI is not there, whereas in the fintech applications it is there. So that's why now the customer has started looking at this option, right?
Yeah.
Now, what will happen is that at the end of the day, the ecosystem which is being generated with the collaboration of this fintech organization will bring in more options to the consumer, and they will choose fintech. That is my perception. Because if you see Cambodia, if you see Vietnam, if you see Singapore, if you see Thailand, if you see Myanmar, if you see Africa, the popularity of this fintech is very, very high, because most of these countries other than the Singapore and Thailand have not seen the desktop and laptop era. They were without any device to the mobile device. They have directly jumped to that. So for them, mobile device is everything, right? And also the infrastructure which is offered by the government in those rural areas. So having said that, this will also apply to the deep rural areas of India also, right? Having said
Yeah.
this, what happens is that the reach of this fintech application will penetrate deeper into the rural areas and provide the convenience, because for them to reach out to a financial institution is taking a bus and travel 20 kilometers and then come in the banking hours and then approach. Whereas if something is offered on the fintech, for example, there are algorithms now. In India, CIBIL is the credit rating agency for the loans, but those are the bigger loans. But have you heard about the micro and nano loans? So in the smaller countries, people with the in India, that we call it as a microfinance. But microfinance, what happens is that is it 20,000 rupees, right? So 20,000 rupees is still significant, because in Myanmar 20,000 rupees is 5 lakh checks, right? But what about 1 lakh check loan, which is what 4,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees loan, right? For very, very poor people, right? So what happens is that based on the transaction history of the consumer on the personal device or mobile device, a system, there are applications which can compute and they can give a credit limit to the customer that he can apply, and there is a pre-approved credit of 4,000, 5,000 rupees which is there in the handset. Now in India, same kind of concept can be applied for the students, or for the senior students, postgraduate and graduate students. I'm not referring to the undergraduate currently, but the graduate and postgraduate students, even when they are surviving on their pocket money from the parents, when they have not started earning, even this kind of a credit limit will be very useful to them. And in some countries, there are companies called a Santander Bank in Europe, right? They are calling it as the gold-based savings account, right? For example, there is going to come Valentine Day is coming, and the boy wants to give some gift to the girl, and that is costing somewhere around 50 euros, right? So they start saving the 50 euros over a period of 4 or 5 months, and then suddenly, and they have got some credit limit, and then after saving 50 euros, he learned that now he has 30 euros as a credit also. So he can choose a gift of 80 euros, right? So these are and what happens is that at the end of the day, institution which approaches the customer, they will get the loyalty of that customer.
So while digital banking is used by almost half of the world's adult population, and financial institutions have enough data at hand to rethink the way they operate, to become more efficient, more customer centric, and as a result, more profitable. The question is, how are the banks equipping themselves to get the most out of their data to keep up with the competition?
Actually, if you ask any bank, everybody will say yes, right? Every bank aspires to get the most out of it, right? But if you ask me as a practicing manager, this is easier said than done. If you see, what happens is that, first of all, if you talk about the banking data now, the data which we capture through our core banking systems and through our other ancillary systems also, whether it's the treasury systems or the trade finance systems, all these systems, most of the time we are capturing numerical data, right? Now the size of the numerical data itself, for example, my bank database size, though I am in a small economy, no, we have very limited customers, still the database size is 300 GB. If you talk about a bank like ICICI Bank or Axis Bank or HDFC Bank, the database size is around 2 to 3 TB. That is the database size. Now, if you make a data warehouse out of this database size, the 3 TB multiplied by 15 becomes 45 TB. That is the data warehouse size. Now, if you add structured data to it to make it a big data, and to add some more pieces of data, for example, customer demographics information and all these things more in detail, not only the one which is coming in form. If you are trying to capture more and more information from the customer, so you will be having around 100 to 150 TB of big data situation. Now, 100 to 150 TB of big data situation, the every day what happens is that processing of the data, and we apply any kind of processing onto this data. So what will happen is that whether we are running the predictive analytics or we are running the Monte Carlo technique, the Poisson arrival pattern, anything which we are applying onto this big data, what will happen is that it is a huge kind of processing, right? So the banks, generally what happens is that very, very big banks in size, for example, DBS, SBI, ICICI, HDFC, etc., they are in a position to do some kind of big level, big data analytics. But if you talk about the smaller banks, they are not even in a position to afford the cost of this big data processing. This big data processing cost per year is more than $1 million.
Yeah.
Right. So if the bank total budget is $5 million, they cannot spend 20% only on the big data.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the banks fully equipped, the larger banks, yes, they are trying to. Now, when we are processing 100 to 150 terabytes of data, so 100 to 150 terabytes of data, now how much of it is useful to us at this point in time? Still, I'm not very sure, because the reports are there. Whatever people see on the daily reports is, let me give you a surprising fact to you. 90% of the bank in the world are using Power BI Pro from Microsoft. You know why? Because it is very convenient. It addresses 60% of the needs. No, it does not address 100% of the need, but it addresses 60% of the needs. But if you talk about SBI can afford to have a big data exercise because their customer base is very big. They have appropriate budget and they can do this processing. Now, again, applicability of this big data processing, because when you are spending so much of money, SBI IT budget is $1 billion, because I've been talking to Bhasin and Mahapatra for many years, right? So what happens is that if you are talking about SBI, they have a $1 billion budget. They can easily spend $100 million on big data. Now the question is that by spending $100 million on big data, and 60% of India is rural, right? What is the ROCE? Right? Technologically, I'll be very excited to do this project. But the board will permit me to do that, I don't know, right? Right. Yeah. So what are the returns? If I go back, if government says that okay, I'll tolerate that cost, it is good. It will help the people. But from the business perspective, still the results are not that encouraging. We have implemented one kind of a big data project for Suzuki many years back. I will not mention the name of the company where I was working when we did that. We applied it in the automobile segment for the new car releases. When the cars are new car model is launched and so many customers purchase. So what happens that companies are very eager to understand that are there any problem with any of the parts or any of the features of the car. So they try to capture all the information. Whenever the customer bring back, they take the feedback from the customer, and then the supervisor also gives some feedback, and the technician also gives some feedback while addressing the issue. So we started capturing it, and then we designed a system where what happens is that where people bring in the car and they say that, for example, let me take example of Mahindra vehicle, right? The Mahindra XUV, when it was launched, if you apply brake at the above 90 km speed, so it makes a very loud sound. So if you are a new driver and you get terrified with that sound, you may lose control of your car, right? Which could not be tested into during the testing phase, right? So now again, if this kind of feedback is coming in, customer will say that when I applied, there was a loud sound and I was terrified. Now the service supervisor will study and say that maybe the sound is coming from the multiple factor. One of them could be a brake pad. One of them there is a clutch related some bearing issue, and there could be some tire related issue also. There is some skidding of tire also. So altogether there's a big sound, right? Then the technician will say that okay, tire problem was addressed due to the alignment, right? And then maybe the rim size is not very appropriate. Then some brake pad there is something, and the clutch wire also there was some issue, right? Now what that when you compile this data for all over the country, you come to know that whether there's a manufacturing defect, whether there's a design defect, right? So you can carefully choose the supplier. Sorry, right? So this is how big data is being applied. We made this project for over a period of 10 months. We implemented it to the Suzuki, and then the Suzuki, definitely the cost of implementation at that time was around $250,000. Suzuki is a big customer, so they could tolerate that cost. Sorry. In the year 2006. Just imagine $250,000 was the cost. And then how they would have applied and how it was useful. The business justification comes in later. Technically speaking, we have come a long way. But what happens is that when we talk about big data, all the results have to come in time so the business decision makers can take the decision in time.
Yeah.
So technology has to deliver that. So, and then what happens is that the sanctity of data becomes very important. Because big data means that we are collecting data from 100,000 places, right? Now, from the 100,000 places, if we are collecting data, and all the data which is coming in, the integrity needs to be maintained. It should not get modified due to noise or any other thing. And then what happens? It has to be extracted, and then the warehouse is being built. From the warehouse, then the processing has to happen, and from after the processing, then the parallelism has to work on it in order to process this data. So if all the processes are in place, then we'll be able to get the result out of it in a predictable manner. But what happens is that, we need to make sure that whether whatever results we are getting in, is it serving the need of the business decision makers?
Yeah.
For example, generally what customers are interested in, what business decision makers are interested in, that how many most of the time they want predictive analytics. I'm talking about my experience. Other people can talk differently, but most of the time my managers and CEO and deputy CEO and all this marketing head and sales head, they ask these things only. Okay, how many customers we have acquired? What is the demographics of those customers? How many transactions they have been doing? How many are the new one? How many are the old one? How many have become dormant after some time? So what is the age group they belong to, right? So these are the kind of data mostly people work on that, right? Now, what happens is that generally, if we talk about big data, if suppose I am as a customer have stopped doing transaction with some application, maybe Paytm, let's take example. So if Paytm asks me explicitly that why you have stopped doing transaction now, So maybe possible if I say that no, actually I've not been doing any purchases, or maybe I'll say that no, somehow I think that there is a better option to me, or maybe I think that the Paytm is not giving me good discount, or maybe there is nothing new, something like that. So these kind of input have come, and if they do the survey for 400, 500 customers, they capture this data and they process it. Then the big data makes sense, right? They will say that on this extrapolation, what I got is that some of the customers, they say that your schemes are not getting modified into their area, so they have lost interest in paying using this application. Some other application is giving better schemes in that area, something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
So which is, according to you, which is not happening with most of the banks. And
Yeah,
the reason, yeah.
technology, actually what has happened, sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. What has happened is that the technology, still the mechanism is procedural. Mechanism is not like that. Tomorrow, suppose that with the mobile device, when people are doing transaction, no, if you say that okay, if you give me a feedback, I'll give you 2 points for every feedback every time you make the payment. So, and each point is 1 rupee. So what will happen is that if I'm doing 10 payments, so if I'm getting 20 rupees free, so I'll type in some lines.
Yeah, yeah.
And generally people who are about 25 years of age, they will type the right thing. People as 25 years of age, the maturity is low, so they can type anything. But the people with more than 25 years of age, whatever they give input is true, right? So with the same mobile device, if you start capturing all those things into your server, right? So still this kind of culture has not yet come in. That is the first thing. Second thing is the systems are not yet equipped to tackle that kind of networking load. Because if every device is giving feedback, so see the kind of load getting generated on the telecom service provider, the kind of load which is coming onto the server, right? So there is a cost coming in, right? Because you are capturing real-time inputs.
So, sir, leading banks are making use of big data in big ways. The big banks, I would say, like you named one of SBI. So, from boosting cybersecurity to cultivating customer loyalty through innovative and personalized offerings that make modern banking a highly individualized experience. If you can let us know how you are relying on big data technologies to improve customer experience and marketing initiatives.
No, big data can be used to improve customer experience significantly if implemented this thing, because what happens is that everything is about customer experience management. Every company talks about the customer centricity. And if you see the design thinking, right? So design thinking, what happens is that if you apply the design thinking concepts, right? It is all about the customer experience. So now what happens is that generally what happens is that people do the survey, right? Let me relate it from there. People do the survey. So now in the survey, what they take is that one thing is that the customer experience, customer feedback, right? 1 to 10, something like that. Then there's another this thing, what you call as another parameter, which is used of customer what do you that is called as the ease of use of the solution, right? So that is the second factor. Then there is the customer this thing regarding the customer loyalty, right? So how long the customer was associated with the business, right? How long the customer was active with the business. So if suppose the company starts taking, suppose in the mobile example which I was giving, that if the company takes that, okay, and give 1 to 10, they answer these 4 questions and you get 4 extra points, right? So customer will give something, right? So customer starts capturing, and these are all numerical things, 1 to 10. So the cost of the network transmission cost is not very high in that case. Company like SBI can very easily do that. So now what happens is that this data is being taken along with the customer demographics and all this. When the company is doing the business intelligence calculation, when they are making the data warehouse and data mart, they'll see that, okay, the customer belonging to this geography, that they are talking about these things, right? That they are very comfortable using the application. But customer belonging to geography B are not very comfortable using the application. What is the problem? Is there a literacy level of problem, or is there a kind of devices which they can afford a problem, right? Something like that. Maybe my application runs very good on high-end devices where the resolution is good. But when you talk about the lower end smartphones only, but maybe I think customers facing some challenge which we could not notice that, right? Because we all test on good devices, right? No company tests on the entry level devices, right? So when they start capturing all these details, there will be additional inputs which will be coming into with respect to the customer demographics, relating the customer demographics to the customer experience, right? And that will be quite useful to the organizations.
So please talk about your recent initiatives on advanced technologies to further smoothen the process and customer interactions. And what are your top technology focus areas over the next couple of years?
Yeah, actually, to talk about that, when I was in India, that definitely India is a much more matured economy. Now I'm in Myanmar, which is a upcoming economy. So definitely my initiatives will not be, currently we are not implementing anything called as big data, or we are not implementing blockchain, parallel ledger here. But definitely what happens that Myanmar has got one very big challenge of infrastructure. So now what happens is that, and the economy is weak, the infrastructure is weak, then financial inclusion becomes difficult, right? Because the electricity is not available for 16 hours in the rural area. So how the bank can run, right? So even if you open the branch, when there is no power, either we have to arrange for a solar power, or then only the branch can run, right? So then that fintech becomes the solution, right? So when the fintech becomes the solution, and then what happens is that Myanmar is a country which has not seen, and I think Africa has also a similar experience. The country has not seen the laptop desktop era. The people have leapfrogged directly from the no computing device to directly to the smartphones, and that the smartphone is everything to them. It is an entertainment device. It is a transaction device. It is a handset. It is a communication device. It is a small laptop, you can say that, whatever it is, a surfing device, everything it is, right? So what happens?
That's the new normal now. Yeah, that's the new normal everywhere.
No, but what happens is that in Myanmar, this is the option in the rural area. So now what happens is that in order to approach the customer, that is the only one channel we have to approach the customer. So all our focus is on that. So what happens is that we have very strong digital initiatives where we are trying to make sure that in the absence of even national ID, can we open an account digitally only through the mobile device, right? Second thing is that if the customer is not having full KYC, so even can we start with a fintech solution to give them some some payment power, right? And also give them some kind of financial instruments like basic nano loan also on the digital device, and even they can do so many transactions on that, right? With one digital device, they can travel all over the country. They can book the bus ticket, government. They can pay the electricity bill. They should be able to recharge their handsets. They should be able to apply for a loan. They should be able to pay their school fees. They should be able to purchase gold, etc. They should be able to look for that. If they want to do the charity donation, they can do that, right? So many things are possible through one device, right? So, and what has happened is that what we are doing is that we are trying to come up with one solution which will address both, right? So it will link both, right? So what happens is that it will be very easy to acquire the customer from the fintech to the bank side, right? So what happens is that when the customer is weak, when only the fintech is meeting the needs, tomorrow the customer gets into, maybe student getting into some business, or somebody who has been doing some kind of a smaller job, and then he has grown up to become a manager. So now he needs to have a bank account. So cross acquiring from that to the bank account, that is our focus. Now the challenge in this, the biggest challenge in this kind of situation is that there are two. One thing is that Myanmar is not an English speaking country. People learn English at a much later stage. So what happens is that with the English, it becomes difficult. And the Myanmar language, if you convert into the Myanmar language, what happens is that it takes more space. So, sorry. So fitting in that UI into interchangeably is another big challenge. Now, the third level of challenge is security. What happens is that the cyber security is a concern for everybody in today's world, and especially we are financial institution. So all the hackers are always keeping an eye on the financial institution. When they find someone weaker, definitely they'll do fraud, and the frauds keep on happening. And I've been seeing this frauds even in India also, even here also, because I've been sitting on the fraud committee for quite sometimes 7 years. So what happens is that the cyber security, we have to make sure that whether it's a Myanmar or it's any other part of the world, whether the budget is low or not, doesn't mean that cyber security is not needed. Cyber security is needed as much as which is needed in India or any other part of the world. Now, how to implement that in an optimal cost? What are the innovative ways of making the things secure without increasing the cost, right? So these are some of the challenges which we are facing while implementing that. At our data center level, definitely we take all our precautions. But even at the handset level, for example, we can, if suppose a bank is having 7 million customers, means that 7 million handsets are being used to access that bank's mobile banking, right? If suppose the customers do not want to spend on antivirus, so bank, it is not possible for bank to pay for their antivirus cost. Even if it is $1, then 7 million customer means $7 million. It's a lot of money, right? So we as an organization, we cannot afford to take the cost of that where the customer does not want to spend that. For example, if I ask you, are you using an antivirus on an endpoint control on your handset? The answer, I don't know what is the answer, but most of the people, the answer is no, right? So what happens is that, but definitely if I ask you, do you do any financial transaction on your handset? You will say yes, right?
Yeah.
So anytime you are vulnerable to the malware, ransomware, or any kind of that kind of challenges, right? So it becomes very difficult. And nowadays, what we do is that we use two-factor authentication. We use MAC device binding. So at least it should be known device and it should be two-factor authentication. Now we are adding the third-factor authentication, where if the transaction amount is more than certain amount, then you use the fingerprint authentication. If it is more than an amount, then all the three authentication. Then it should be PIN, it should be fingerprint, it should be face, right? So that if the handset falls into somebody else's hand, they cannot use that, all those things, right? So this is how we are trying to control the cost and facilitate it at the end user level.
Yeah, of course. So this brings to the end of this discussion. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Mr. Shukla. Appreciate your time for sharing the valuable insights. And I'm sure these are really informative and useful to other organizations as well.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.